Hello and welcome to Database Management Systems. I'm Jovita Christie, and in this video, I'm going to explain to you database failures and recovery in transaction management. So let's begin. First, we are going to see the different types of failures that can happen in a database. One such failure is a transaction failure, which could be either a logical error or a system error. This occurs when the transaction itself fails or gets aborted. And a logical error would be where the person who wrote the transaction himself or herself made some logical mistake in the transaction, and that's why the transaction failed. A system error would be an error where the system had to abort the transaction. So, for example, this could be due to a rollback because of a deadlock to resolve a deadlock. That would be a system error. The next type of failure that can occur is known as a system crash. A system crash happens when your operating system is affected because of some internal operating system error. The third type of failure can occur because of a disk failure, where your hard drive gets corrupted, and that is why you are not able to fetch your data from the hard drive to the main memory. So these are the types of failures, and failures in a database system always occur, and you need to be prepared to handle these failures. Most database systems have to be prepared to handle failures that can occur in the system. One such method that can be employed to handle failures in a database system is known as shadow copying. In shadow copying, the original database, which is present in the secondary memory, is kept as it is, but a copy of this database is created, and this is brought into the main memory. And whatever updates need to be done are done on this secondary copy and not on the original copy. So only this copy is updated, but the original database remains as it is. And there is a pointer which is created, which is known as a DB pointer, a database pointer, which points to the current copy of the database, the copy which is a fair copy. It points to that particular copy of the database. Now, suppose a transaction gets aborted due to any kind of failure, then the copy which we created, where all the updates have been done, will simply be discarded, and the original copy, which is already present in the secondary memory, is considered as the current copy. So you simply have to change the place where the DB pointer points. So DB pointer can simply now point to the original copy. And in order to maintain the atomicity property of a transaction, we need to make sure that if a transaction is aborted, then whatever changes that were made by the transaction have to be undone. To undo these changes, we need to make sure that the original copy remains as it is, which is very simple, very easy to do in a shadow copying method. Now, this is how shadow copying looks in practice. So first of all, the operating system is asked to make sure that all the pages of the new copy of the database have been written out to the disk. This procedure is followed whenever the transaction is not aborted. If the transaction is aborted, it's very simple. You discard the copy, keep the original. But if the transaction successfully completes or commits, then in that case, this is what will happen. Number one is the operating system will write all the pages of the new copy of the database to the disk. The disk is the secondary memory. Then what happens is the database system updates the pointer, which is the DB pointer, to point to the new copy of the database, and the new copy would now become the current copy. And then the old copy is deleted because we have a new copy which is very stable. It's already been written in the secondary memory. So that's why we can remove the old copy. And finally, the transaction is said to have been committed. So if you remember the video where I showed you the states of a transaction, then there is a state called partially committed. So a partially committed state is where transaction has finished doing everything on its end, but then you see all these operations that we are doing from number 1, 2, and 3. These operations are being done, and only after that the transaction can commit. Before that, you cannot say that the transaction has committed, because there could be an error, any type of error, while performing these 3 steps, and due to that, the transaction might have to be aborted. So till this old copy is deleted, if you're following shadow copying method, till this old copy is deleted, the transaction is not committed. So this is how the shadow copying method works. Now there are some disadvantages of the shadow copying method. It's very expensive. And by expensive, I mean, if your database is really large, for example, you have 1 terabyte of database, then such a database cannot be brought into the main memory as a whole, because if you do that, then your main memory cannot hold that much data. So it's very difficult to bring the whole database into the main memory every time that you want to make some updates. And in order to remedy these things, we have another method which is known as shadow paging. In shadow paging, instead of copying the entire database to the main memory, the database itself is divided into several pages. And from these pages, it will be decided in which page exactly you want to make your changes. So for example, if I want to make all my changes in a table, and that table is present in this page, then I will only copy this page. So only this particular page is copied. Everything else does not need to be copied. And then what is done is, suppose my transaction gets aborted, then of course all the updates are made in this in the copied page. But suppose my transaction successfully commits, then in that case, this page can be discarded, which was the original page. And in case my transaction gets aborted, then all that needs to be done is discard the copy and keep the original. So it's the same concept as shadow copying. The only difference is that instead of taking the whole database, copying the whole database, we are dividing it into pages and copying only the page that has the data that you want to update. So that's how shadow paging works. Now, overall, the shadow paging and shadow copying is very difficult to do if you have concurrent transactions in your system. And obviously, by now, you know that concurrency is inevitable in any database. And we cannot remove concurrency, we have to keep it. So if you have a lot of concurrent transactions, then it's very difficult for such transactions to work together, because suppose they require the same kind of page, then every transaction creates a copy of such a page. And then all such pages are kept in the main memory and updated. So it becomes very difficult to track which changes were actually made. So that's why the most used system of recovery is the log-based recovery, which is used in most of the databases. And now we are going to see log-based recovery. So in a log-based recovery, there's a file that the system stores, and in that file, data is stored in the form of these quadruplets. So what does this quadruplet mean? There are 4 values in it. The first value is TI, which stands for the transaction identifier. So you must have noticed that every time I have told you about a transaction, in this unit, I have always talked about T1, T2, T3. So those are transaction identifiers. XJ is a data item identifier. A data item identifier would tell you which data item is being updated. So essentially, this would be a table name in your database. But in our case, for simplicity, we are just going to use A, B, C, D, and so on. V1 stands for the old value. This means before being updated, what was the value of that data item? That would be stored in V1. And in V2, the new value is stored. So after being updated, what is the value of that data item now? That is stored as the new value. Other than this, there are also some operations that are stored in the log file. And these operations are, first of all, if the transaction is starting, then the identifier of the transaction along with the start operation. This is also noted down in the log file. If a transaction commits, then even the commit operation of the transaction is noted in the log file. If a transaction aborts, then that too is noted in the log file. So these many things are noted in the log file. Now let's see how we can use this log file to make a recovery from failure. And in order to understand that, I'd like you to first know how database is modified. There are two methods of doing it. The first method is known as a deferred modification, where a transaction does not modify the database until it has committed. So till the transaction commits, it will not modify the database. And the second modification is immediate modification. In this, modifications occur while the transaction is still active. So it's not necessary that the modifications are occurring as soon as possible or as soon as the transaction makes an update, but they are occurring before the transaction is committing. So transaction is still in active state and modifications are being made to the database. Whereas in deferred modification, till the transaction gets committed, the database is not updated. So any system would employ either of the two modifications based on requirement. Now let's see how we can recover using a log. So for that, there are two operations. The first operation is known as the undo operation. Undo operation is performed whenever is performed in this manner. So first of all, the log record sets the data item specified in the log record to the old value. Undo, as the name suggests, obviously, will undo everything that the transaction has done. So all the new values are set to the old value. This can be done by looking at the log, because the log is storing the old value as well as new value of a data item. So you can always look there and set the data item to the old value. This is done if the log record contains the start log of a transaction, but not the commit log. So earlier I told you that the log also records when a transaction started and when it committed. So if there's a failure occurring and afterwards the log file is checked and it is found that there was a transaction that started but never committed, which means that transaction's commit record is not present in the log. So in that case, what will happen is we will have to undo all the work that that transaction has done. So all the changes have to be undone. The next option in log-based recovery is redo. In redo, using the log record, the data item which is specified is set to the new value. So in undo, it is set to the old value, and in redo, it is set to the new value. And this is done if the log contains the start log as well as the commit log of the transaction. So if a failure has occurred and the log contains start and commit both of the transaction, then the redo operation can be done. Now consider this transaction. We are going to see an example of a log-based recovery. So consider this transaction. I've been using it a lot in my videos, so you already know what it does. It transfers the amount of 50 from A to B, and you can consider, just for the sake of it, that A and B are two different accounts in a banking system. And consider a second transaction, which is T1. So first one is T0, this is T1. This transaction doesn't do much, it just subtracts 100 from C. So that way I have two transactions. Now the log, first of all, assume that both transactions are happening serially, because it's just an example. So T0 is happening and then T1 is happening. So this is what your log looks like. This is a file that is stored by your system, and your file will look like this. You will have, first of all, because T0 is the first transaction that is executing, first of all, it will make an entry in the file that T0 has started. Now, afterwards, you can see what T0 is actually doing. T0 is subtracting 50 from A. So here we are going to assume that the original value of A is 1000. So that's why there is an entry in the log that says T0 A 1000 and 950, because 1000 is old value, 950 is the new value. Then next we have the same transaction performing plus 50 in B. So in this case, what is done is, once again, there's an entry T0B, and the old value, let us assume, is 2000. Then the new value is going to be 2050. And then if the transaction T0 successfully finishes all this, then you can say that the log entry will be made, which is T0 commit. After that, let us say that T1 is starting. So in that, we are going to write down in the log T1 start and assume that the value of C is 700. Then the new value is going to be 600. And finally, T1 will commit. Now let me show you how we can use this log in order to make a database recovery. So in this log, consider that there is a failure at this point, which means only 3 entries were done in the log, and after that there was a transaction failure. And this is all my log contains, the first 3 lines. Using those first 3 lines, I know that T0 started and made all these changes, but then it did not commit. So what we need to do is we need to undo T0. So that's why there is an undo operation performed for T0, which means the values of A and B will be restored to 1000 and 2000 respectively. Next, you can see that there can be a, suppose there is a Now consider that there is a failure at this point. So in the log, only this much data is stored, and after that, there's a failure. So that means my log only contains everything from T0 start to this statement with data item C, but nothing of commit is stored in my log. So in this case, because T0 has the start as well as the commit operation, I have to do redo T0, which means I need to make the values of A and B 950 and 2050 respectively. And as for the value of C, what I need to do is undo, because transaction T1 started but did not commit. And so all I need to do is subtract, not subtract, but restore the value of C to 600. So this is what happens. Now suppose the failure occurred after the whole log was created. So that means T0 and T1 both committed. Then in this case, what you need to do is redo T0 as well as T1 So both the transactions, whatever work they have done, we need to redo, which means we will make the value of A 950, the value of B 2050, the value of C 600. So this is how a log-based recovery works in a database system. Now there's a problem here. The first problem is that the search process is time consuming. You have to, if you had hundreds of transactions, then you'll have to go through your entire log to search and find out which transactions need to be redone and which transactions need to be undone. And the second problem is that most transactions need to be redone, because imagine that you have hundreds of transactions and after performing 99 of them successfully, there's a failure. So you have to redo 99 transactions, and this would make your recovery process very slow. So in order to prevent this type of a problem, we can introduce checkpoints in the log. So a checkpoint will save the work done up to that point, so that afterwards when you make a recovery, you can easily perform that task by checking where the checkpoint is present. I'll show you that with an example. First, we are going to see how checkpoints work in practice. So we are going to see what is the step-by-step process of a checkpoint. So the first step is you will output onto stable storage all log records that are currently residing in the main memory. So whatever is present in the main memory currently, the log is actually present in the main memory as a file that your system maintains. So this file is stored into the secondary memory at whatever place you want to put a checkpoint at. Then the second step is all this, you will output to the disk all modified buffer blocks. So in the secondary memory, whatever modified buffer blocks are present, which you must have known if you know the database system architecture, that there's a buffer. So whatever is there in the buffer which has been modified will be then transferred to the secondary memory. And lastly, output onto stable storage a log record of the form checkpoint L, where L is a list of transactions active at the time of the checkpoint. So this will show you that while the checkpoint did its work, these were the transactions that were active. So later on, using this list L, you can decide which of the transactions need to be undone and which need to be redone. Let's see it with an example. So we'll use the same log that we had earlier and consider that there's a failure occurring at this point in the log. So at this point, you know that T0 and T1 both have committed. And normally, without a checkpoint, what you would have to do is redo T0 and redo T1 both, because both have committed and started and committed. But if you introduced a checkpoint, let's say that after I finished T0, I inserted a checkpoint. That means whatever T0 has done has already been copied to the secondary memory. So I do not need to redo T0. I only need to redo T1. And although it seems like a very little thing when only 2 transactions are present, this would actually make a huge difference if you had hundreds of transactions to be redone. So this is how log-based recovery can be improvised by using checkpoints. And that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.